Hello there, this is my Quilcom Harvester, which is a granular synthesizer, and if you don't know what granular synthesis is, you can have a look on the internet, on YouTube. There's lots of information, but basically it's a means of loading a WAV file, a sound clip, and playing back parts of it multiple times, forward, reverse, different rates, whatever, to create new sounds. So I'm going to give you a very basic overview of the front panel first. If you look at the mouse there, you'll see this area on the left is for the system, for MIDI, for instrument tuning and so on. This area displays the loaded WAV file. This is where you can load the WAV file. The grain maker controls the generation of the grains. This area, the travel, this moves the grains around on the WAV file. We can set grain levels and grain pan. Up here we have a standard amplitude envelope for the whole synth, which is polyphonic, by the way. And here we have a tracking filter, whereby we can pick out a portion of the harmonics based on the pitch of the key pressed at any given time. Finally, we have an effects section here, so some standard effects that I use quite frequently, normal stuff, VU meters, and the preset area there where we can load and save presets. Right, a bit more about this system panel on the left. You can set the maximum polyphony, the number of voices that will sound. There's a range of options here. Mono, of course, is a single voice, and when you're in mono mode, the hold, stole and retrig on you and retrig, stolen come into more useful play. This is the pitch bend range. It's actually quite good to have a wide pitch bend range with granular synthesis. I can demonstrate this later. This is a portamento effect which has some use in granular synthesis, but not that much. This is the option to create a test note. You set the note here that you want. We go for middle C, which is control click default, and there we are. We can trigger a note for that, so we don't have to press a keyboard if we want to experiment and do lots of manipulations. Right, at the bottom here we have the system tuning thing, which is you can choose the octave you want. What I like to do is this is the C equivalent. I like it, so C becomes E, and so on. And we can fine tune or detune to match other instruments if necessary. Now the pitch LFO is not really a regular LFO because it's more like a kind of a mini arpeggiator where you can choose various scales or notes from scales. And just to demonstrate that briefly, I've got a preset down here called Rye. Now I'm just going to press a note on the keyboard here. So that is triggering samples without the pitch LFO in. And if I've got the blues one selected here, but we can have any of the others. Whatever you want. Okay, so that's the system panel. Now onto the wave display here, which is, it shows the envelope. This can load mono and stereo waves. When you first load it up, you will have the E minor Mystic guitar loaded, but if we do a load operation here, find the test waves I've supplied, load that up, then it will display, and you could then
La 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 la.
I am here. Various waveforms that you just loaded. So all the presets are made for the ATM Mr. Guitar Wave. So that's a good place to start for listening. Now when you've loaded a wave file, you can make it unpitched and with no interpolation, and this is the bass pitch of the note, which I've just set at 60. It probably isn't 60, but I've set it to 60 anyway. So whatever note I press on the keyboard, it will play that. So it's unpitched. See, no change, but if I make it pitched, so I'm just playing a couple of notes on the keyboard. Okay. Here we have the quality, which with no interpolation. This is really mainly for just auditioning the original unadulterated waveform that you've loaded. It's the lowest CPU usage, so it may be perfectly good for percussion, for instance. Then we have interpolation, which uses a little bit more CPU, but it's not very good for long samples where you want the instrument to stay in tune over the whole sample range. So for most purposes, you go to the precision. This uses a double precision counter with interpolation. So that's the one to use really. Now the display here, if I set a note off, you'll see that red line that marks the current play position. But if we go to, I'll just reset that. If we go to, I don't know, let's set 5 grains, I'll play something on the MIDI keyboard. Then you can see the position of each grain that's playing. I'll show you how to change the position quite soon. Another point of interest about the wave display with the grain superimposed is that the brightness of each play position represents the volume curve. Here's the wheat preset, and you'll see that the brightness fades in and out as the amplitude of each grain fades in and out. So that's another little bit of visual eye candy, so it could be useful. The path to the wave, I should mention, is saved with the song, or with the preset if you wish to save a new preset. So bear in mind that if you change something here, when you change a preset, change a wave file that's been loaded, you'll need to go back and load the original one if you want to audition the preset as I actually made it. So now I'm going to talk about the grain maker, one of the very important panels on here. This is where you decide the maximum number of grains you want from 1 to 11, and I do like knobs that go up to 11, so you've got a maximum of 11 grains. There's another technical reason for that, but it doesn't matter. This is the spread between grains in terms of position, and this affects the probability of a grain playing in reverse. This is the create rate of the grains. So if we have 1 grain set, this will be 1 grain every half second. If we have 10 grains set, it will be 10 grains every half second. Okay, so let's start off with 1 grain. I'll explain these other points in a little bit. Okay, so I'm just going to get this going here. Now I've set this to a a low percentage on the length, and I'll talk about this afterwards. Here we have the envelope of every grain that's created, and this is a total of 100% of the length. So now let's say I want to have a nice slow attack. Right, you can see we've gone up to the maximum length and beyond there, so we can reduce the hold time back to be something more realistic. And let's say we wanted to also fade out equally, so let's turn that up to 33% and then reduce this back to 100%. Or we can make it even shorter if we want. And as I said before, you'll notice the grain fading in and out in terms of its brightness there. Okay, now if you go above 100%, you'll still hear the sound, but what you may get at the end is a click because the envelope hasn't had time to decay, so the sample finishes. So try to keep it within 100%. And for most cases, an attack and decay of at least 1%, just to give a nice smooth start. Okay, so let's increase the number of grains. Now the loop function means that once a grain has finished playing, it's recreated immediately rather than waiting for the create rate to give the next signal to create. So let's just demonstrate that. You can see it's going a lot faster. If I slow the rate down really low and then click on loop, it goes faster. Now if we go to re-trigger the grain, I'll just turn that off for now. So re-trigger will restart the grain at the point that its creation is requested by this oscillator here. So re-trigger can give you a very, very fast repetition of grains, but the grains don't complete. So you will almost certainly get a click at the end of the grain playing period if you use re-trig, but it can be useful, some great effects. I'll just show you the effect of the reverse, which I've set here at about 75%. This means that more grains than not will play in reverse, and it's a random function that controls that. So let's just start a node. That's the problem with randomity, is that you pick out patterns, but there really aren't any patterns. Okay, let's turn that off for now. Right, I'm going to talk about this grain creation or grain maker oscillator along with the spread. As I said before, this is it's an oscillator that controls the creation rate of the grains. So if I start a node off, it's about 1 every 3 seconds. But if I put this up to 5 grains, then that's 5 grains every 3 seconds. You can see the colours sequencing through there. Okay. Now the maximum spread in a percentage is the difference in the start position of each grain. So I'll just start off with that very small spread and increase it, and you see the effect. So we're cutting into the next string and then we're going beyond that. So that's the effect of the maximum spread, and it gets very exciting when you go up to the maximum amount of grains. with a large spread on it. Put some reverse on that as well. So we get some forward and some reverse. Not bad, eh? So, let's turn that off for a moment. Now the grain sequence, apart from controlling the rate, they can be sequential, which means from the LFO, or random. And if we go to a random, we need a lot more grains, of course. This one controls the rate of the randomness. No, you're not. We get some nice effects there, especially if we increase the spread. Go back to sequential. Reset that. Now the LFO that creates the rate, the level of the LFO determines the trigger points of the grains. So the classic one is to ramp up, but we have the usual range of waveforms from the LFO, so you can trigger grains all sorts of ways. The depth controls the amount of the LFO onto the grain generator. Normally you would leave that 100%, but I added this because if you alter the number of grains in real time, as you probably heard, you get clicking. It's not very nice. So one way to do that is to alter the depth, and there is no clicking. And that's because grains are not being turned on and off, they are being enabled by the oscillator. And this control here can be controlled in your DAW, in your DAW, so you can alter that level without getting any nasty clicking, and increase or decrease the density of grains. Of course, if you have a lot of grains, then that effect becomes useful. If you only have one or two, it's not much use, really. Finally, this, I think it's finally, linear positive is kind of the normal way. So I'm just going to set a note going off here. Now I'm going to move the start position to part the way through. Okay. And you'll see the red grain there, which is grain 1, and all the others are positive. We can have linear negative, in which case the grains are created behind the red one, and we can have symmetrical, which means the grains are created either side of grain 1. And that is why we have 11 grains. We have a centre grain and 5 to one side and 5 to the other, and that makes 11. And I like knobs that go up to 11, so that's good stuff. So now we move on to the other very important panel here, which is the travel panel. All right, this travel means the motion of the start position based on grain 1 along the waveform. So here we can set where that position starts and the length of play. So I'll just set this going. So let's reduce the length. And we can increase the create rate. And then we can manipulate the start position. Okay, now the envelope shape that we've created here will be the same irrespective of the length, because the envelope is a percentage of the length, and that is the length there. So let's just turn that off a bit. If we play octaves on the keyboard, you can hear that the higher octave is playing at twice the speed of the lower octave, which is nice, but it may not be what you want. So if we go to select pitch to length, then everything plays in sync. That's playing 4 octaves now. So that couples the pitch of the note to this length and modulates the length according to the pitch, so that you can play in time irrespective of the pitch on the keyboard. Okay. As I mentioned, I think several times possibly, the reset button resets the whole machine, and if you've got grains playing, because a grain will play to its end irrespective of the amplitude envelope, it's nice to be able to reset it, especially if you've got a lot of long grains set. Now then, direction of travel. Here we have the range of travel and the rate of travel. So let's set a short rate, a short length rather. You can get some nice things going there. Set a very low rate. Now you can see. There we go, and we can go forwards or reverse. Again, this is a conventional LFO. So you can have any kind of behavior: random, glide, square, sine, triangle, and this will modulate the direction of travel of grain 1 and the subsequent grains. So if we have a lot of grains set, let's say 6, I don't know, let's go with it. So that's something quite creative you can do with the travel control. I should mention this last one here, the jitter. If you have very short grain lengths and very rapid grain generation, it's nice to make the start position vary randomly, slightly to some amount, in order to remove flanging artifacts. So I'll see if I can set that up to demonstrate that. Right, this is just a quick demo of the usefulness of the jitter. I've set onto loop, so they're going as fast as they can, those little grains. I've set a short length, and this is what you get without jitter. I'm just playing notes on the keyboard. Now if I reduce the length, increase the jitter, Okay, so that's the jitter control is only really useful for very short grain lengths and lots of grains, but it can make a very big difference to the sound in those conditions. Okay, two more things we can control is the level of each grain, that's the amplitude, and the position in the stereo field, the pan. Okay, so the thing to remember is that these LFOs are only sampled by the grain when the grain is created, and they retain that, so you're not panning an ongoing grain from left to right. You have to pan one left and one right in effect, or whatever. So I'll just demonstrate this. Let's turn something on here. So this is the grain level. So we've got rate and depth there. And this one is the pan effect. Both of those can add to the sort of thickness of the sound, where you've got a lot of grains flying around left and right and centre, and changing in amplitude as well. The amplitude envelope, as I mentioned before, controls the overall amplitude of the grain stream, and it will hold the grains playing until the end of the cycle. If I just play this on the MIDI keyboard. Now let's turn the attack and release times up, and you'll hear the effect. The tracking filter, as I mentioned before, tracks the pitch of the actual note. So if we want to go up with the filter cutoff frequency, 1 octave up or 1 octave down, or even semitones if you like, it's tuned, we can do that there. And this is the type of filter, of course, just the usual range of options there, resonance, and this is polyphonic, and also the mod wheel is linked to control the cutoff frequency. So if I turn that to 0, play a note, mod wheel has no effect. Turn this up about halfway, and then so that's the tracking filter. Okay, so now we'll have a quick look at some of the presets, which make use of some of the things I've talked about here. One thing I realised I forgot to tell you earlier is that if I play a note, the display goes off when more than one note is sounding. So if I play 2 notes, you see nothing. Let's reset that. So 1 note, as the second note cuts in, you don't see anything until the first note has finished its envelope. Alright, the next one. This is a classic reverse. note in the correct pitch, but very slowly, making use of the travel. And also notice that the pan is involved there, spreading the sound across the stereo field with each grain in a different position. This is showing how you can make new sounds from old, if you like. So that's just using a small section of one of the string plucks to make a completely new sound. This is exploring the random elements of grain position, LFO pitch, random amplitude, random grain position. Ra you've already heard. Again, another exploration of making a new sound from old. You'll notice maybe that this is using the glide function, which I told you was not a lot of use, but you can use it quite creatively. So if I start off on the bottom C on the keyboard, go up one octave and hold it, and then press the top C on the keyboard, it will glide up. Another new sound, quite string-like, but not in the way you would expect from a guitar string. Sound. Now this one's using very short envelopes of sound to make sort of percussive like noises from a guitar string. All grains random. Let's turn on the pan just see what that does. Not much. Oh, let's increase the depth. About that. Okay. I'm quite fond of that one actually, because I've got a sort of strumming pattern out of that by using a square wave for the travel modulation. All right. Another slow playback with different qualities, and there we go. So try different waveforms, try different presets, mess around, and most importantly, I hope you have fun.